This is the Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 3, Episode 15, Goodbye Diabetes author Dr. Wes Youngberg. And I'm your host, Tom Butler. The interview this week is a long one, so I'm going to get right into it. First, however, I do want to report that I'm very happy that I've done 2 weeks in a row of upper body workouts. The main message here is that it's important to keep trying. Despite massively failing last year to meet my upper body workout goal, I am now on track for a better year. Primarily, I think this is because I'm getting a lot of good support from those cheering me on. No matter what habit you are trying to change, keep going, even if you stumble, and keep working on strategies to keep you on track. The interview this week is one of the most knowledgeable people on the planet when it comes to reversing type 2 diabetes. Wes Youngberg has a doctorate of public health and preventive care and is one of the founders of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He is the author of 3 books, Goodbye Diabetes, Hello Health, and Memory Makeover. He has a private practice in Temecula, California, where he brings close to 40 years of clinical experience to help patients make crucial lifestyle changes that can restore healthy metabolic functioning. There is a lot more about his experience that comes out in our discussion, and here we go. I am extremely happy to be having the conversation with my guest today. Thank you, Wes Youngberg, for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Tom.
You have played a huge role in my understanding of diabetes, and I am so glad that listeners of the podcast are getting to hear from you. I want to start out this way. You have been interested in healthy lifestyles for as long as I've known you. I'm guessing that interest started early in life.
Yeah, Tom, Chris, we've known each other since college days, and then we were roommates at Loma Linda University. We were together at what we call the Green Swamp, right? Where a whole bunch of us students were living together, and boy, we had quite the life, didn't we?
Yes.
We had our own Doberman, mascots, and life was good back then. And just basically a band of brothers, just hanging out together and supporting each other. But what really got me passionate, Tom, about what I call lifestyle medicine now is my parents were Christian missionaries in South America. And that's where I was born. I was born in Chile. I recently had a patient that was from Chile. I go like, hey, I was born in Chile. They're like, what? And anyways, while there, my mother was diagnosed with glioblastoma, brain cancer. And that was at age 39. I was 10 years old at the time. And I witnessed, my mom going from a super dynamic, fit, exciting person to be around. I loved my mom. I was a total mama's boy, right? I loved her. And to witness her just go downhill so quickly with glioblastoma, I remember saying to myself, Tom, I was raking leaves in Bering Springs, Michigan, one autumn afternoon with my father, about 3 years after my mom had passed away. So I was about 13. And, you can only talk about the Chicago Cubbies and other stuff for so long before finally we got to some really serious conversation, because a lot of leaves in our yard on Greenfield Drive there in Bering Springs, Michigan. And I said, Dad, why did Mom die of cancer? I literally asked that question. And he didn't know what to say. We were raking leaves together, and he just stopped and kind of was looking down the road and trying to come up with an answer for his 13-year-old son. And I remember before he had a chance to say anything, I finally said, Dad, I wish I knew right now what my risks are so I could start doing something about it now. And without realizing it at the time, that was literally the watershed moment in my life that kind of shifted my perspective into learning everything I could about health so that I could if I could be my best, right, at protecting myself against what happened to my mom. Because, my mom was this super healthy, well individual, and all of a sudden she was gone. from a devastating disease. So that really impacted me, Tom, into wanting to figure this out, and of course that's how I ended up at Loma Linda studying health science, preventive care, and lifestyle medicine.
Well, when you started there at Loma Linda, it was called the Health Sciences Department at the School of Health. Now it's called the Doctorate of Public Health in Preventive Care.
Right.
And so, what about that program kind of captured you, coming out of this experience where, like you said, you wanted to learn everything you could about what risk factors and what to do about risk factors?
Well, it's interesting. We all got to know each other at Andrews University in Michigan in college, and a whole bunch of our other roommates that we had also moved from Michigan to California about the same time. I'd studied health and physical education in college, and I wasn't planning to teach or to do that. And so I was always planning to go on to graduate education. So I was trying to decide what to do. And, most of our friends went into medicine, and I had a lot of relatives, a lot of uncles and aunts and cousins that were in traditional medicine, going to medical school. And while that intrigued me, I kind of knew already that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to understand. Really wanted to get into understanding disease from a preventive standpoint. And of course, as you know, Tom, there's 3 levels of prevention. There's primary prevention, secondary prevention, where you're dealing with, risk factor management. And then you got tertiary prevention, where you already have a disease, but you're trying to protect against progression of that disease. And so that, in my practice, I deal with all 3 levels of prevention, but the most motivated people are the ones that either have a serious family history, and so they're doing primary and secondary prevention within that context. But the most motivated are the ones that already have some major disease, they already have Alzheimer's, they already have diabetes, they already have, not to just equate the two as being of equal concern, or heart disease or whatever it might be. And my role with them is to help them figure out how to reverse back out of that scenario and prevent further progression, but also really improve and if possible, reverse their disease. I actually moved to Loma Linda University to study physical therapy. That was going to be my second degree. And I was really looking forward to it because I had an uncle who's a physiatrist, a medical doctor in basically physical therapy. So he had his own rehab hospital in Pennsylvania. And he'd been instrumental in helping my mom when she was sick. We had actually lived there with them for the first 6 months after her surgery. I actually got approved to go there, and I went to the first day of orientation at Loma Linda. And one of my uncle, who's the physiatrist, he said, "Wes, I always thought of you going into health science or preventive care." And I said, "Well, I thought about that, but, so I actually interviewed that afternoon after my orientation with 2 doctors, Dr. David Neiman and Dr. Richard Neal, at the School of Health at Loma Linda University. And of course, they were both being real political, like, "Oh, you're already enrolled in this program. Why don't you finish physical therapy? And then you can do the doctoral program." I go like, "Hey, I already got a college degree." After looking at the curriculum, I just like, "Are you kidding me? Like, are you just like keeping this a secret from the rest of the world?" And because this was exactly what I wanted, as much as I would have loved and enjoyed doing physical therapy. In fact, I still teach in the physical therapy program from time to time. So I love physical therapy students. They're a great group of people. But I wanted to really get into lifestyle medicine more broadly and clinically. I literally transferred that first day in my PT program, into what was called at the time the Doctor of Health Science program, which was essentially clinical preventive care. Some people would refer to as clinical preventive medicine from a fundamental lifestyle medicine perspective. So yeah, that's how that happened. It was kind of like, being in the right place at the right time kind of thing, divine appointments all the way through.
Well, it's kind of funny because I know that the physical therapy program is like in the same building, like down the
Yeah,
hall. So you
yeah,
didn't have to go
exactly.
very far.
Exactly. It was like really strange. Then the other doctor, the professors were going like, oh, you should just finish the program. I'm going like, listen, I know what you're doing, man. And so this is what I want to do. And so, I had one prerequisite left that I hadn't finished, and that was actually organic chemistry. And so they said, you got to have organic chemistry in order to get officially approved into this program. And, the program was starting at the end of the summer. And so in about 10 weeks, or maybe 8 weeks. And so they say, go down to Valley College there in San Bernardino and see if you can get into the organic chemistry program, because registration was that day, literally that day. I go like, what? So I rush over to the registration table. There's Dr. Anderson, the organic chemistry teacher, sitting at his table. And so I said, hey, so I want to register for your class. And he goes like, young man, class is full. Like what? So I tell him, no, I got to take your class because I need it to get into my doctoral program. And he said, sorry, but we're full. See, he said, but I tell you what, come tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, and I'm going to read the roster. And if one person doesn't show up, it's your spot. I go, great. All right. So I literally get there first. I'm the first one in the door. I'm sitting on the front row. They just sweating bricks. And so Dr. Anderson read all the names off, and one person hadn't showed up. And he goes, Youngberg, you're in. So that's how I got to be in the program that first year. Otherwise, I'd had to wait a whole nother year to get in.
That's an incredible story. Now, you had an interesting moment while in graduate school that I was there for, and that's related to your own cholesterol levels.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what happened and then what effect that had on your thinking about lifestyle disease?
It's interesting. I was actually taking a class called Lifestyle Diseases and Risk Reduction from Dr. Richard Neal. He was this amazing statesman of a doctor. He was an African-American doctor, tall, good looking, most articulate professor that I think I had the entire time I was at Loma Linda University. And he was really great at talking about, preventive medicine and lifestyle medicine. And so one of the responsibilities in that class, a lot of people in that class were actually preventive medicine residents. They were doing their post-medical work in specializing in preventive medicine. So we had people fresh out of college like me that was just going into a 4-year program on lifestyle medicine. Then we had other people that literally had, maybe 5 to 8 years more experience than I did in the same class clinically. And so we had to give presentations. And so this was 1984. This is my freshman year in the program at Loma Linda. And you may recall, Tom, that 1984, Doctors Brown and Goldstein won the Nobel Prize for Medicine for elucidating the role of cholesterol in promoting cardiovascular disease. Now, of course, this was because there was a lot of big pharma money behind that elucidation. Prior to 1984, hardly any physician believed cholesterol had anything to do with heart disease. Okay, and in fact, I used to go through the paper charts, and in the paper charts, I'd go up before 1984, the reference range on a normal cholesterol level started at 130 and went up to 320. So if your cholesterol was like 310, you're normal. That was in the normal, that was in what was considered to be the 95%, which most labs that we do medically are based on, the normative 2 standard deviations from the mean, right? And so if you fall within that 95% of the population, you're normal or you're within reference. So it was only after 1984 that was changed, that the cholesterol now needs to be under 200, which is less than halfway, less than the median. So in other words, almost everybody, or 75% of the adult population at that point, would then be put on Mevacor, which was the statin of the day. And so a lot of doctors say this is a big scam. Says that there's no way that 75% of Americans to just automatically qualify for a medication who's never been fully vetted long-term for more than 4 years, right? Because of the cancer question. So anyways, I got to give a presentation on this topic because I was learning along with everybody else. So I talked about how, all the new research indicating that cholesterol was related to heart disease. I have different perspectives now. I mean, I think cholesterol has a role, but nowhere near as big of a role like what we're talking about, like blood sugars or even blood pressure, or there's so many other risk factors that are far, far, far more important in terms of causing heart disease than a high cholesterol. Okay, so but at the time, we knew what we knew, and so I actually was hired by the school there to actually start running, basically screening cholesterol levels with a mobile monitor that was literally the big as like a computer. And I would go to the malls and other places and other departments and screen people's cholesterol as part of the National Cholesterol Education Program. So I was like, hey, everybody's got to check their cholesterol. And so one of my classmates was a med tech undergrad. And she said, hey, Wes, a whole bunch of us are getting together and we're going to get our blood drawn at the Loma Linda Medical Center. And we're going to have a lipid profile, a full cholesterol profile, total cholesterol, LDL, triglyceride, HDL, so forth. So I go like, great. So I'm thinking I'm Mr. Fitness, right? I'm thinking I have this inflated health ego, like I'm super healthy because, I was paying attention, and I thought I was at least, and I was doing everything possible to be healthy because that was my goal. That was my passion. So I went and had my blood drawn, and I'm going like, yeah, this is going to come back good. And I already knew what all the charts said that, somebody my age, well, I was 24 at the time, should, if I'm going to be in the healthiest 20% of the population, my cholesterol is going to be, the way I viewed it, at least, my cholesterol would be about, 140, 150 at the most, right? Because, all through college, I had always worked out to be in the upper 95th percentile of fitness. And I'd been able to pull that off. I worked out regularly. So when I did my AFID testing, I actually was fitter than 95% of my classmates in the field of physical education. Okay, so I thought I was pretty, fit, right? So then I saw Lori was her name, med tech that was in our doctorate program. I saw her at school, right, at the School of Health, and so I was walking towards her, going like, great, I'm going to find out that I'm really even fitter than I think I am, right? And she had this worried look on her face, and she says, Wes, I'm a little concerned about your cholesterol. I thought she was messing with me. I really did. I thought that she was just pulling my trick, and so then she said, no, look. She showed me the paper. My cholesterol is 244. So I was off the chart. I was like way above 95th percentile, and only in this case in the wrong direction, right? And so that's what kind of popped my Mr. Fitness and wellness bubble. It made me realize that maybe I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. And along the same line here, Tom, especially as we're talking about how this relates to other conditions like diabetes and what we've been doing with you and so forth, About 10 years ago, I actually decided to bite the bullet and do a 23andMe saliva test, genetic analysis. And I really didn't want to do it at first because I was totally aware about the privacy concerns and that eventually this was going to get into the wrong hands. I knew all that was going to happen, and indeed that has happened. They've had major lab leaks, and basically they got totally hacked last year. But I remember saying to myself, even if the whole world finds out what my genetic mutations are, at least I'll know. And that's really the most important thing. And so I realized that if I don't know what my weaknesses are, and therefore I don't know how to manipulate that information to my benefit, I'm losing out. Okay, so regardless what other people might do with it. So when I did that test, Tom, I discovered that I had a major blood clotting mutation called factor V Leiden. And because I found out, I shared this with my family and my extended family, my cousins and relatives, and many of them had the same mutation, which, depending on what studies you read, up to an 800% greater risk of having a deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, a stroke, a heart attack, massive. So all of a sudden it hit me, Tom. It hit me when I was in college, before I found out, this was when I was like 22, before I found out that my cholesterol was sky high. I went to the funeral of one of my uncles who was a physician, an ER doctor in Fort Worth, Texas, who had a massive heart attack while working in the ER one night. And he literally died on the floor of the ER. So, if you're a doctor in the ER and you die of a massive heart attack, that's a bad, bad heart attack, right? And so, undoubtedly, he had this type of mutation as well, but he didn't know about it. Later, I discovered that other uncles had blood clots in their legs, and my grandfather died of a massive heart attack due to a blood clot. And so, like, whoa, okay. Because I did that genetic test, and only because of it, it actually made me aware of all the other issues. It made sense that I had such a strong family history of heart disease that's related to blood clotting. And so cholesterol really wasn't the issue. Primarily, the issue is blood clotting risk and all the factors that lead up to that. And so I actually, when I discovered that, Tom, I didn't go like, oh no, this is horrible. I didn't go, woe is me. I actually smiled when I saw that test, and I said, wow, this is great news, because now I have one more thing that I can do to fix, to prevent whatever otherwise might have happened to me or in the future. So the reason this story from my youth, when I was 24, is so important is because a lot of us are hesitant to do testing because we're a little afraid about what we might discover. Okay. And my point all along with all my patients is like, hey, the more things we discover that are risk factors in your physiology, the greater the potential that we can improve your health. Because if I don't find anything wrong with you, I can't help you. Right? There's nothing that we can do. But if I can find 5 things that need to be fixed, now you're going to be that much healthier. But if we find 20 things that we can fix, you're going to be that much healthier. So that's the goal, is embrace finding things that give us direction on what to do.
Well, I remember it really clearly in the things that you were saying at the time, because they were significant, because you were very fit. Your diet, your activity levels, the choices that you made, you were being thorough as about anybody who's 24 years old would be at the time. And I remember you talking about, this is the power of genetics. Now you wouldn't look at a 245 total cholesterol the same way today as maybe you were back then. But at the same time, I think that that moment of saying, okay, there's an element in here when we're talking about lifestyle disease that also has to be considered. Is there we do have a genetic makeup that we
Yeah,
bring to the table.
right. No question about it. No question about it.
While you were in graduate school, there was the formation of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Today, that's a really prestigious organization. Can you talk about that organization's beginning?
Actually, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine wasn't started until after I graduated. In fact, it started in the year 2000. So I graduated in 1988. But around the year 1990, about 2 years after I graduated, I started an organization called the American Preventive Care Association. This is mainly for many of my colleagues that had gone through that very unique doctoral program in lifestyle medicine at Loma Linda University. So at that time, there was really only about 300 of us. And so I started it for us, and it served its purpose for 3 to 4 years until we started talking about, making something big for everybody, especially my medical colleagues. And so it was probably in 1999, year 2000, that Dr. John Kelly, who was a older student that had gone through medicine. He had started medical school in his 40s, and he was actually in insurance. He was in health insurance. So he was kind of a cerebral, money cruncher type. And he had a real passion to get into lifestyle medicine. So he went through medicine, and we got to know each other that way. I was president of the School of Public Health Alumni Association at the time. And so, which just meant I got to pick a lot of the speakers to come, at the yearly conferences. So we got to know each other during that time. And he said, "Hey, Wes, can you help me put together a unique academic college, society of doctors that's called the American College of Lifestyle Medicine?" So he was our first president. He just got honored at the yearly meetings last year in Florida. We started out just like 7 of us, right, at Loma Linda. And now it's like we have like 5,000 members. It's an international society. You can become board certified in lifestyle medicine. While I was on the board of directors from the beginning for about 10 years. I helped set up the fellow, how to become a fellow. And because I set it up, I was the first fellow, right? I'm going to apply first here because I set up the criteria. and so yeah, it's a great organization that it's primarily there for everybody that's in healthcare, not just physicians and not just people and physicians who have gone through preventive medicine residency, but really you can be in any specialty of medicine or healthcare, okay, and then subspecialize in lifestyle medicine. So we had ophthalmologists subspecializing in lifestyle medicine. Why? Because lifestyle has a lot to do with eye health. You can be an endocrinologist, obviously, and subspecialize in lifestyle medicine because, we clearly understand that how you live has a huge impact on hormonal health, and of course diabetes is part of endocrinology, and so forth. So no matter what specialty you are, we even have physicians that are ER doctors or surgeons that subspecialize in lifestyle medicine. It applies to everybody. And so right now, that's the unique draw into lifestyle medicine, is that you can do it regardless of what your main specialty is. You just incorporate that into your practice of whatever you do.
Hey everyone, I'm briefly interrupting this episode to remind you that it is simple to have your opinion shape the Cycling Over 60 podcast. Look for a link at the top of the episode description that says send me a text message. When you tap the link, a text message box will open up and you can type something that will be sent directly to me. I look forward to reading all your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for the show. Now back to the discussion. When you step back and look at those early years when there are like 300 of you getting together and talking about stuff, it's kind of hard today to really kind of grasp how different it was, the conversations that you would have at your meetings.
Yeah, that's true. I remember, I gave many of the keynote presentations because, we're a fledgling organization. At one point we almost went bankrupt, and now I think we have like $20 million in the bank or something. It's a big organization now. It's been well run. We have a great executive director that is taking us to whole new levels. And of course, it's organization that it's time has come, right? The whole world needs and understands their need for lifestyle medicine, for addressing the cause of the problem rather than just looking for, fancier and fancier Band-Aids to put on the problem.
Well, good job to you for being a part of helping to create an organization like that has provided education for a lot of people. So I just think that's a great thing you've done.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to give a couple-hour lecture to family medicine residents at Loma Linda University. And so there was about 35 first, second, third year medical residents there at my presentation. And what I did is I focused on Alzheimer's and diabetes, basically my two favorite general topics. And of course, to address those effectively, you gotta fix everything. You can't just fix a few things. You got to fix as many things as possible, including optimizing the immune system, which is really something that a lot of doctors haven't really understood effectively. If you don't have a really good immune system, you're destroying the beta cells of your pancreas, and you're also destroying the cells in the hippocampi of the brain, which are memory cells. So you got to have a good, strong immune system. But while there, one of the things that I'm really proud of that I was kind of the talking head for a program that's called Diabetes Undone, which was organized by a team of professionals that, based on my experience from the last 30 years, now 40 years of experience with diabetes. And so the Diabetes Undone program is a turnkey program that has 40 videos, has a workbook and a cookbook, and basically it's how-to. So I just had a patient today, Tom, who was referred by his primary care physician because he's got diabetes. And he wants to reverse his diabetes naturally. He doesn't just want to go on the latest and best medications because he's concerned about some of those side effects. And so we had a really great session this morning. So I said, here, just get on this Diabetes Undone class. You can watch it with your wife at home, and that'll show you everything that you need to do to be able to reverse this. And of course, I gave you that 11-page document that talks about reversing insulin resistance and trying to regain and restore beta cell function to the pancreas, the ability to make insulin as well. And by the way, anybody listening to this podcast that wants a copy of that, just simply go to my website, dryoungberg.com, and all my contact info is there. Email me and we'll send it to you. We'll send you that PDF. You can share it with anybody you want. It's not copyrighted. It's basically 21 strategies on how to dramatically improve your blood sugars. And so
Awesome.
I shared that with the residents, Tom, and they like loved it. Like, wow, yeah, this is what we need, that goes beyond just here's the new medicine, good luck.
It's really interesting to me, this aspect of it. This is what we need. If you go back when you first got out of school, it was pretty soon after you got out of school. I don't remember exactly when, but you ended up heading off to the island of Guam.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that being there allowed you to be a part of the clinical care team, maybe in a different way than you could have been elsewhere.
It kind of fast tracked me. I was really fortunate, Tom. When I left academics at Loma Linda, my first job was I was director of corporate wellness at Loma Linda University School of Public Health, and then there was a big upheaval politically at the university where differences of opinion amongst the top echelons of administration. They literally tried to close the School of Public Health down. And when they finally realized that that was a really bad decision, they just kind of reframed it. And so I ended up leaving my full-time faculty position at Loma Linda University because of that. And I always tell my friends and especially anybody like is struggling with maybe potentially losing a job for whatever reason, I say, the two best things that ever happened to me professionally was losing my job. I kid you not. That's literally the two best things that could ever happen to me professionally when I lost my job at Loma Linda, along with pretty much every other faculty member of the School of Public Health because of what they were trying to do at the time. But that forced me I loved academics. I loved the environment, stimulating. And I started all kinds of other programs while I was there. But it wasn't actually my main forte. I didn't realize at the time. So that forced me into clinical work. And so I started working with the Loma Linda faculty medical group that was in Sun City, which is a retirement community on the way to San Diego, just south of Loma Linda. So I started working there, and then also in Ocean Beach, which is also San Diego. So I started doing clinical work 4 days a week, and in a medical group setting. And so while at the Sun City office, I met Dr. Charles Brenniger, who is the director of the Diabetes Treatment Center at Loma Linda and had been for decades, and became close friends with him. He would refer a lot of patients to me. And we ended up working together in Guam for 3 years. It was really cool. While I was there and while I was involved with the school from a alumni association standpoint as president of the alumni association, during that time, I was asked if I would be willing to go as a medical missionary to Guam. And I go like, Guam, where's that? Like I have no idea where Guam is, And it's like, why would I want to do that? I was working with some of my colleagues to set up a preferred provider organization in Southern California. We had all these plans, to bring lifestyle medicine to all the groups. While we were doing that, I actually became very impressed that we should go to Guam. It's just one of those things where you call them divine appointments. God made it really clear that that's where he wanted me to be. And so I ended up being there for 14 years, Tom, and from 1994 till 2008. And yes, while there, I basically set up a department of lifestyle medicine for a large outpatient clinic. We had like 300 employees, so it's a big medical group. And I remember when I first moved there, they set up a meet and greet session with other doctors in the community. And so they would come up to me and they say, hey, so, what do you specialize in? And I'd tell them, and they would laugh. They go like, you're gonna try to change people's diets and reverse diabetes? Are you kidding me? You can't reverse diabetes. We've never ever seen anything like that. They were just being sincere, like going like, wow, that's, good luck to you, they would say, but They just didn't believe it was possible. And so I took up the challenge. And what was really cool about Guam, it's a very tight-knit society where what's unique about Guam is that you have like the governor's wife and the senators hanging out with the lowest socioeconomic people too in groups, and they all get along great, because they're like a big family basically. Literally, that's what they are. It's just a big family and wonderful, loving people. And so what I realized is that everybody was thirsty for knowledge. There was a diabetes death rate on the island of Guam that was 5 times that of the U.S. mainland at the time, and it wasn't that great here, right? So it was a very serious issue, but largely it was a issue of hopelessness. Like, oh yeah, I got diabetes, so I'm going to end up with an amputation and go blind and have kidney failure, just like Aunt Mary and Uncle Joe did, right? So they literally, it was a defeatist mindset. Once you get diagnosed, it's over. Okay. And so my role was to change that perspective. And so I did a lot of education in the community. The government was calling me every week. Hey, can you give a talk over here? Can you, we're having a conference on Saipan. Can you give a talk there? So I was literally I was giving talks everywhere. Okay. Around not just Guam, but all the Micronesian islands. And then the governor of Guam, which was a brilliant politician, he realized that for his he was basically he wanted to be a governor second term as well. And so he actually created certain initiatives, including one initiative, which was the prevention of diabetes on Guam. So they asked me to head up this task force, which was, basically it was a political attempt to ingratiate himself with the population. Rightly, it was a really wise or smart, astute thing for him to do. Okay, but most of the doctors are going like, are you kidding me? Like, who's going to believe that that's possible? Right? This is so funny, Tom. I ran into this one guy who he was an ER doctor from Laguna Beach, who had been contracted by Guam's Health and Human Services to run some workshops, and I forget for who. But somehow we hooked up. I just ran into him somewhere, and he goes like, hey, we should do lunch, right? So he takes me out to Thai food, and he's a super funny guy, super, neat guy to talk to. And so he says, hey, man, before we get to food, let me tell you something. I saw something in the paper that just cracked me up. So that there's this initiative in the paper that's all about, reversing or preventing diabetes on the island. So can you believe that they would actually put that in the paper? And so I let him go through the whole thing for about 5 minutes. And then I said, hey, John, I'm the author of that initiative. I'm in charge of that task force. And he looked at me. He wasn't sure if I was messing with him or not. And then he goes like, oh, well, I guess I got something to learn, don't I? And so, it was just kind of funny. But, and I say, hey, John, I totally get it, man. You're just, that's what I was taught in school too. You're just rehashing what you learned, and you went through school a lot before I did. And said, but the good news is that this is preventable, and it's even reversible. You're like, what? This reversible? Because he's an ER doc. He said, we've never even considered that possible. Because he just sees all the polyopathies, all the pathologies that come from out of control diabetes. And that's what set me up to be able to write my book, Goodbye Diabetes, because I'm not a writer per se. My publisher hired a nurse to basically full-time spend a year with me. Okay. And we would meet for 3 to 4 hours every other day, like 3 to 4 times a week. And she could type faster than I could talk. And so we met at Mr. Kebab's right on Jefferson Street here in Temecula, 3 nights a week. We got lentil soup and a salad, and falafels, and we did that for a whole year. And that's how the book was written. The Goodbye Diabetes was written, and she was a masterful writer, but she would always, type out a manuscript of what we talked about, bring them back to me, and go like, no, 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 that's not what I said. We changed it around, so it took us twice as long to write the book that we thought, but it ended up being an amazing book on the latest on lifestyle medicine strategies to literally reverse diabetes in most cases. But the real goal isn't necessarily to reverse diabetes. The real goal is to prevent the complications of diabetes, because that's the only reason diabetes has a name, because of its complications. Okay, so there are some people that are really more like type 1 diabetics that have lost 98% of their ability to produce insulin. And so those people can still dramatically improve their health, okay, but they may still have to take some medications to make up the difference. But I'm telling you, Tom, literally, I believe at least 80%, if not higher, of people who currently are labeled as type 2 diabetics, or basically, in other words, their blood sugar meets the criteria for diabetes in some way, at least 80% of them can reverse their diabetes, even if they've had it for 20, 30 years.
Well, I think that's really powerful because, again, it's coming from 40 years of experience of seeing case after case after case after case.
And you know what got me into this, Tom? We were actually roommates at the time at the Green Monster, this swamp. And it was literally a swamp. In 1985, that was my second year. In fact, it was actually the end of my first year of training. So it was the 84-85 school year in the spring. We had a special seminar series that was sponsored by the School of Public Health, and they brought out Dr. James Anderson, who was the chief endocrinologist at the University of Kentucky at Lexington. And he presented a lecture that just blew me away. That's when I realized that I was going to be going into tertiary preventive care. He basically treated brittle, hardcore diabetics that were actually lean. They were not the obese, typical diabetic, right? They were lean diabetics that were basically advanced, and he reversed diabetes in 90% of them without even exercise. He just, in the hospital, put them on a high fiber plant-based diet in 1970s. And so he'd been publishing studies on reversing diabetes that, basically over 50 years ago. And so when I learned that in 1985, I go like, oh man, this is what I want to do, right? And I kept thinking, why am I not hearing this from everybody? Why is this only coming from some guy from the University of Kentucky? He's a top endocrinologist, okay, but yet nobody's paying attention to him, at least not enough. And so I started becoming the evangelist about reversing diabetes. And so the rest of the story, how I got into Guam and wrote the book, and now have my own clinic helping people do the same.
Well, it's wild because, you get that focus, then you go to a place, Guam, that becomes a very unique laboratory for rolling out what you want to roll out, from a perspective of prevalence in the population, from some of the social dynamics in the population. It really was like a great laboratory to kind of perfect things. What year did Goodbye Diabetes come out?
Ooh, I think it was 2015.
Okay, so that's a number of years after this presentation that you heard that that's saying, hey, we need to think about this differently. But when the book came out, did you get pushback? Was it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, not as so. I was doing keynote presentations for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which of course I'm speaking to the choir there. Okay, but even there, going like, really? Where's the evidence? I'm going like, I'm showing you the evidence. You gotta go to the evidence, and then also, and I've always been an advocate of this, stop saying you don't have enough evidence and do what you clearly know is most effective and show what happens in your client and patient population. Okay, so the majority of positive impact we get with patients is by just using our head and making clinical decisions based on what we know works. And when we're dealing with lifestyle medicine, I mean, it's not like we're giving a medicine that is likely to cause cancer later on. We're not giving chemotherapy here. We're talking about eating healthfully. We're talking about exercising. We're talking about paying attention to your stress levels, paying attention to your sleep habits and lifestyle in general, things that are well understood intuitively. And there's a lot of scientific and basic science research on, and we're just putting it all together. And there are actually a lot of randomly controlled trials now, but to actually wait until you have more, randomly controlled, placebo-controlled studies is actually foolhardy because it's so powerful, right? So, I mean, I'm all for those trials, okay, but we need to follow our own observations and take advantage of that now.
I think it's such a huge thing because you're talking about do something that is only going to be healthy. And you could say, like, just do it for 6 months and see what it looks like. We're not talking about, like you said, we're not talking about chemotherapy, but some cases, I think people are more accepting of if you say, okay, you're going to have to do some chemotherapy with this.
If we tell them, hey, you're going to take this should help you. I think it's going to help you. You're going to lose all your hair and you're going to feel horrible for 6 months. Like, oh, whatever you say, doc, But if we start talking about changing the diet, like, oh, no, I don't want to change my diet. Don't do that to me, doc. Just give me a medication where I don't want to eat again.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we could get really sidetracked in that conversation, but now I'm not particularly fond of the label type 2 diabetes.
Sure. I don't blame you.
And it seems like an old term that needs to be abandoned. And if we were going to abandon the term type 2 diabetes, what in your practice do you replace that with?
I like what you're saying, Tom, because I'm not a fan of labels either. In fact, I tell people, I'm not diagnosing you with anything. I'm basically helping you understand where you're at on the continuum of risk, relative to everybody who has a certain blood sugar level. I'm showing you, like, you're way over here. Like prior to 1997, Tom, if your fasting blood sugar was 135, you didn't have diabetes. Now, if your blood sugar is 127, you have full-blown diabetes. Okay, so they changed the criteria. Now, the rationale for that was actually a good rationale because, in other words, risk factors should be tied to concerns or consequences. So what they're saying, well, you don't really have diabetes until your fasting blood sugar goes above 140. That used to be the criteria. The problem with that, Tom, is that even before people came close to meeting the criteria, they already had the complications of the disease. They already were getting neuropathy that led to lack of sensation in the feet, and then they would hurt themselves without realizing it. They would become ulcerated and gangrenous, and boom, now you got to have an amputation or else you risk death. Same thing with nephropathy or kidney damage. Basically eye damage, all heart attacks, strokes, etc. All these things were occurring even before the definitive diagnosis of diabetes could be met. And so that's why the research says we got to change the criteria so that at the upswing of pathology, of diagnosed pathology, when that upswing occurs, when blood sugars correspond to pathology, that's where the diagnosis begins. And then they also came up with a criteria for pre-diabetes, which was basically establishing that there's an early pathology here, still a pathology. It's still doubling your risk for a heart attack or stroke. Okay, but prior to 1997, there was no definition of prediabetes. And so, there was no concern if your fasting blood sugar was 100 or 110 or 115 because you were way under the criteria for diabetes. So that's where I came up with the 5 stages of high blood sugar along with Dr. Brenniger from Loma Linda. And we published that with CDC grant money and gave it out to all the doctors in Micronesia and Guam. And I presented, Tom, this 5 stages to a conference in 1997. It was a conference on dealing with diabetes throughout the life cycle. And another speaker at the conference at Loma Linda was the chief endocrinologist at Kaiser. He was in charge of the diabetes programs for all of Kaiser throughout Southern California. And so he saw that 5-stage program. He goes like, "Hey, Wes, could I use this in Kaiser?" I go like, "Yeah, CDC grant funded, man, go for it." And so he said, "Thanks." And so a year later, we're speaking at another conference. And he comes up to me and says, "Wes, I got to tell you, man, I presented this to all my endocrinologists. They love it. We're using it as a clinical tool to show patients where they're at, but we're also using it as an early diagnostic measure, because it was 5 stages rather than 1 stage, right?" So I lost track of him. He's probably retired long ago now, but it was neat to see that was making an impact in other areas as well. And then since that time, we expanded it to 10 stages that include 5 stages of diabetes, all the way up to critical diabetes, looking at the A1C, the 1 hour and the 2 hour postprandial or after meal blood sugar levels. So people that use a continuous glucose monitor are willing to check themselves more often can actually see what works and what doesn't.
Well, it's interesting. My career kind of took me away from health promotion and education, and my wife has been more connected to health information than I have been for most of our marriage. But I sure wish that my doctors had a different understanding, because I started showing evidence of prediabetes years ago. And what I would call metabolic dysfunction years ago. And they were waiting, they were waiting for it to become an issue. I would have really appreciated for them to say, this is an issue now, not, once we see 7 A1C or something.
Yeah, very true, Tom. In fact, as we discussed previously, what really impacted me is even all the way back in 1997 when the criteria changed, there was already evidence. This is almost 30 years ago. Well, no. Yeah, almost 30 years ago. There was already evidence then that before somebody actually meets the full criteria for pre-diabetes, which is stage 3 on my scale of 10 stages of high blood sugars, they already have lost over half the ability to produce insulin. That's not lost forever necessarily. We now know studies have shown that can be regained if we address the underlying cause of the problem. To actually recognize that while you're still at stage 2 high blood sugar, which is even before you're diagnosed with prediabetes, you've already created a dysfunction of 50% in your beta cell production of insulin. That's huge, right? Especially since it's so closely related to the same thing happening in your brain, where you're literally, in this case, losing memory cells at the tune of 1,000 memory cells a day because of the same metabolic phenomena. So because insulin resistance is the main driver or the most common driver of dementia, especially Alzheimer's type dementia. The beauty of this is to fix one thing, we're actually fixing many things. We're dramatically lessening whatever risk you and I have of developing dementia later on in life is dramatically impacted by optimizing insulin production in the pancreas and minimizing damage to those cells and optimizing the body's utilization of insulin properly.
One of the things that you and I have talked about, and not that this is a consultation for me right now, but I don't think I'm unique in this, is the role of environmental toxicity.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could talk about, is that a big factor or is that a rare factor? What are you seeing?
I really do think it's a big factor. It's one of those, unsung factors that can lead to a problem. It's just not, we have almost blinders on. It took so long for the medical community to acknowledge that fundamental lifestyle factors like exercise, diet, sleep, stress management had a role in this, right? Rather than just looking for the magic bullet, just take metformin or just take, glipizide or just take some insulin, fix your problem. Why change your lifestyle when you can just take some medicine to correct your blood sugar? I've had many patients, not that were coming to me, because patients, by the time they come to me, they're already converted before, I'm not the one that converts them per se. They're seeking me out because they understand what I can possibly help them with. Okay, but there's this view that it took so long for the medical community to even acknowledge that you could reverse diabetes through these fundamental strategies, that it's going to even take that much more time for the typical clinical clinician to become aware, number one, and then acknowledge the benefit of addressing environmental toxins and how that relates to the two main problems with high blood sugars. In other words, a body working properly should never have a high blood sugar, no matter what you do. Okay. So in other words, something is pathologically wrong when the blood sugars go up. So Dr. Charles Brinegar, the diabetologist that worked with me for years, and I worked with him, he would say, Wes, you could drink a whole 2 liters of Pepsi and eat a gallon of ice cream, and your blood sugar should never go up above 120. Now, I don't recommend that, right? Because I think most of us would fail that test. Okay, but his point is that if you need more insulin, you just give more insulin. That was kind of the mentality on how he was trained back in the 70s. You just give more insulin. If you got to give 1,000 units of insulin, give 1,000 units. Do whatever it takes to control the blood sugars. Well, that is not acknowledging the cause of the problem, right? And so what first turned me into the impact of environmental toxins on things like diabetes, for instance, is an NHANES study, which was the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey that is done every 10 years along with the U.S. Census. And so during that census evaluation, they would take individuals with diabetes, large cohorts of people with diabetes throughout the United States, and do different tests on them, including, in this case, measuring the level of environmental toxins in their blood and correlating that with metabolic dysfunction, like diabetes or prediabetes, etc. And what they discovered in those studies is that the level of toxins, these are like environmental toxins, in their blood of diabetics was way more strongly associated with level of metabolic dysfunction than any level of obesity or sedentary lifestyle, etc.
Wow.
So I remember when I first read that, I go like, wow, that doesn't make any sense. How can a toxin do that? I can visualize if you eat too much food, it's going to mess up the metabolism. If you don't get exercise enough, the cells are going to get fat and sassy, and they don't want any more sugar. So they shut down, they become resistant to insulin. And now the pancreas has to make more and more insulin to try to bring down the blood sugar. And that's a never-ending battle that just messes people up. So at first it didn't make sense to me. But then I started understanding that the more I studied it, that toxins create free radical damage. Toxins destroy beta cells in the pancreas. Toxins along with low-grade infections, both of those cause autoimmune changes to occur, which further damage the target cells involved. I started piecing together and understanding that even low-grade toxins that are exposed to over time, long term, have a powerful influence on damaging the pancreas and on damaging the brain. So again, the tie-in with Alzheimer's, which I oftentimes refer to as diabetes of the brain, or diabetes, which I refer to as Alzheimer's of the pancreas, because it's a similar pathology. So that's when at first I didn't want to deal with toxicity issues. I didn't want to get into all that because it just seemed it was outside of my expertise and the scope of what I did. And I finally realized unless I actually become an expert in this, I'm not going to be successful with a large percentage of my patients because that's always part of the problem. It's not necessarily the biggest part of the problem, but in some people it is. In some people, it is a major driver of both dementia and heart disease and diabetes.
You've brought up a couple things here. One is diabetes, and the book Goodbye Diabetes was really released out there to bring your experience. And now you're talking about the issue of memory. And I think you have a book out there, Memory Makeover.
That's right.
Can you talk about
prevent Alzheimer's and reverse cognitive decline?
Okay, and then you have another book called Hello Healthy.
Yeah, that I struggled in how to name that book or put a title on that book. This is a book for 20 plus years. I did a 12-week series of seminars for new patients. Okay, when I was working in the medical group construct, which was most of my life except for the last 15 years, where I've been private practice, I'd have lots of doctors that were within the group referring people for diabetes or for stress management or depression, anxiety. So I literally had 4 different 90-minute seminars going on every week, one every day I would do. And so we'd have like 20, 25 patients come in for a 90-minute group consult, and they would come 12 weeks straight. And I would have 12 different presentations that I would give that are clinically oriented towards what do you need to know to be successful in reversing your condition? Stuff that we don't have time to go over in every visit, right? In every individual visit. So it's a way to accomplish a lot more than we could by just seeing patients one-on-one. And so I did that for like 20 years, maybe 30 years in my practice, Guam, and with the Rancho Family Medical Group here in Temecula. And so I had a lot of data from those 12 presentations. And so after we published Goodbye Diabetes, my publisher says, hey, we got to come up with a new book. And I said, well, let's go ahead and take these 12 lectures, 12 topics that everybody needs to know about, and put them into 12 separate chapters. And so we literally had everything that were in those lectures that we videotaped put into 12 chapters. And then I spent 500 hours, literally, I kept track. I spent 500 more hours adding the latest documentation to each of those categories. That came up with, it's like a 250-page book called Hello Healthy. In other words, 6 months from now, if you run into a friend you haven't seen for a while, they go like, whoa, hello, healthy. Like, what happened to you? Last time I saw you, you didn't look this healthy. That was the mindset of calling it Hello Healthy. And there could have been a better title. I still don't know what that would have been. But it's basically, all the 12 things you want to know to be able to optimize your health.
Well, I like the title because I think there's this element of goodbye diabetes, goodbye memory problems or whatever, but you still want to say hello.
Yeah. And that was part of the rationale.
And embrace, yeah.
Goodbye diabetes, hello healthy.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and this is, a bit of imagining things, but if someone were to embrace hello healthy and employ those things, let's say that all of a sudden everybody became serious about those things and pursuing a healthy lifestyle, how would you describe what could happen, individually and as a society if that happened all of a sudden?
Well, I know a lot of people would be very, very upset. And I say that in jest, but it's unfortunately true. The big pharma would not be very happy at all. To be serious here for a minute, this is one of the challenges that when you're dealing with the business mindset within medicine, which is very strong, there's a huge push to make medicine financially lucrative. If everybody started living really healthily, I mean, just think about all the specialties that deal with complications of disease, which is most medical specialties. They would be, standing in line at the food line, right? And so now I don't expect that ever to happen because as a theoretical construct, there's always going to be people that need help. There's always going to be people that are making bad decisions, because we are human for a lot of reasons. We're either not paying attention or we are willfully avoiding learning what we need to do. And even when we know what to do, oftentimes it's difficult, because, there's temptations everywhere. But, specifically to answer your question, Tom, it would just dramatically revolutionize the health and longevity and the happiness, the peacefulness of our society. It would be amazing what would happen. Depression and anxiety would dramatically lessen. Violence would dramatically lessen. There's actually studies that have been published when you change the diet in prisons to a healthy plant-based diet, or you just offer that as an option. It revolutionizes the mental thinking of the criminals. Okay, there's all kinds of studies that point this out, that a lot of criminal behavior has to do with nutritional deficiency that is more manifest. And in other words, they're at greater risk for nutritional deficiency because of genetic mutations and other factors than the average person. So if they just simply could have their nutrition optimized, that they would potentially at some point get to that tipping point where they're no longer thinking pathologically. And I mean, it's literally a revolution in thought and action and behavior. Okay, so that's just I haven't even thought about that for a while, but there's good evidence of that. If we really take advantage of these fundamental principles and stop making decisions in corporate medicine that just, are beneficial to the bottom line, right, to the finances, and start just making decisions that might decrease money coming into us, but it would dramatically improve the prosperity of the population, of the common person. I could only imagine what would happen, but it would be amazing.
And I hope that we can march closer to that.
I think we can.
Things happen with that. And I just want to point out again, thanks for the work that you've done, because I think that you have made a difference with providers and got providers thinking differently, got primary care providers thinking differently. That's part of what needs to happen to move forward. So,
well, you know what we say, Tom, see, standing on the shoulders of giants, for me, with my background in gymnastics, is doing a handstand on the shoulders of giants. But everybody has a role here, The more people that can participate in what I consider to be an exciting opportunity to dramatically impact people's health, the better.
Yeah, awesome.
Appreciate what you're doing with this podcast, because hopefully that'll resonate with many people listening.
For me, I'm in this period of after 60. I'm really interested in this period between 55 and 80, maybe where people are starting to realize there's something to do, starting to have that motivation. It'd be wonderful to get some of these things going, when you're 25 or 20 or whatever. But I think, 55 is maybe an interesting time when people start seeing things. And it's like that 25-year period between 55 and 80. Yeah. If you make the changes then it's going to make a huge difference. So I'm really passionate about that now.
You just reminded me of something, Tom. This happened like 25 years ago. So I'm seeing a patient who had been referred to me, and I remember she was like 62 years old, younger than I am right now. I'm going on 65 this year. I was asking her, what are your goals? What are your motivations? What are you here for? Giving her a chance to express herself. And she says, I don't know. I said, well, there's a lot of things we can do that dramatically improve your health and your longevity. And she says, oh, I don't want to live. I don't want to live a year past six. She said like 64. She picked 64 for some reason. And I looked at the chart. I go like, that's only 2 years away, Mary. And she says, I know. So I said, why do you say that? She says, because I look at my relatives and my family. She says, about the time they turn 63, 64, they just become a huge burden on the entire family. Okay. And, I don't want to be a burden on my family. I don't want to basically go downhill and just feel bad and be trouble for the rest of my family. It kind of shocked me at the time. And then I said, well, Mary, what would you think if I can show you things that you can do so that when you're 64, you actually are healthier than you were 15 years ago? Would you still want to die then? And she looked at me like she'd never actually thought of that possibility. And she goes like, well, not in that case. I go like, well, that's what we're going to do, Mary. I really believe that you can do this. I that's what I do. I help people accomplish that. And ultimately you will do it, but I'll guide that process. I basically started showing her that you can dramatically reverse these conditions so that even when you're 75, 80, 85, you're actually doing better than when you were 55. That's really true.
Yeah.
Okay, so, we've always said 60 is the new 40, or whatever you want to call it. And of course, that's, my goal is that 65 is the new, 45. That's what I want. That's where I'm headed this year. And so, and I got to be on point too, because if I don't pay attention to what I'm preaching, then I'm falling back. I'm getting closer to my biologic age my chronological age versus a biologic age that's based on the choices that I make. So we have an opportunity to dramatically alter the aging process the way we normally think about it. We're on that journey together, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. And Dr. Youngberg, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I've been looking forward to it for quite a while. So thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Tom, it's always fun talking to you.
Well, maybe we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take care now.
All right. Bye-bye.
There isn't much to add to that discussion. Hopefully, you got the feel for Wes's deep knowledge of the impact of positive health choices. It has been said by numerous guests on the podcast that it is never too late to implement positive health habits. I hope all of you are seeing the results of the choices that you are making and continue to learn new ways of building up your health. And remember, age is just a gear change.